question that was put to us is, what's at stake in terms of civil liberties in this election? And I came up with sort of 6 different things that I think are at stake that have a civil liberties component. I think everybody, first thing they think about is the judiciary, the Supreme Court. But it's not just the Supreme Court. It's all of the federal judges that make law that go up to the Supreme Court, and everybody at the Justice Department that interprets the laws we have. And in some of those instances, you have laws that could be interpreted in a much more restrictive way. And if you put an atmosphere of fear, and then you interpret the laws in the most restrictive way, you can put civil liberties at risk before you appoint a single judge. The second piece is what I would call a climate of fear. One of the candidates believes that the way he's going to get elected is by creating that climate of fear, and that he and he alone can secure our nation. And I'll tell you what, my friends, that climate of fear is dangerous for all of us. Third thing is the whole question about civil liberties and being involved in our personal business. Now, really, do we think the government doesn't have enough to do, that we should be worrying about roads and bridges and education and job creation? I think we should be doing all that. That's enough work. We don't need to be worrying about, in the privacy of your own bedroom, who it is that you find comfort with. Hello, we got work to do. Who cares? As long as people aren't hurting each other, it's just not anybody's business. And so any candidate who presents that there's a bright line about interpersonal behavior seems to me that they have missed the point of what the government is supposed to be about and do, and the work that the government has. And then your civil liberties are really at risk. Wendy talked about the whole issue of reproductive freedom, which to me I think fits into that same category. That in fact, making decisions about your own body and your own life is something that is a personal decision in the context of your own family, your own faith, your own doctor, and that it's not the government's problem. It's not the work of the government to do that. And then the fourth area where civil liberties, I think, are very much in play is how we deal with crime. One of the things that we dealt with when I was mayor was the Innocence Project. We covered some very damaging history where, in fact, the crime lab had not done what needed to be done in order to make sure that the evidence was proper. And as a result, there were people who were in jail who were not guilty and could, in fact, be proven innocent by the scientific methods. And we engaged with that. Now, I took some criticism for that because at the end of the day, it meant that, the city had to admit it was wrong. People came out of jail. But frankly, if the wrong person's in jail for a crime, are we safe? Hello? No? Don't you want to have the right guy? Doesn't it make me feel better to know that we locked somebody up? Wrong person, but oh well, gave everybody a good feeling. Well, that's not the right answer. And so the question about civil liberties is really a question about making sure we're safe because you got the right person. because you protected our freedom, and so you get the right person. And I'm all for, if you did something wrong, you ought to be in jail, and you ought to do your time. I also believe that we ought to, in jail, actually give people some training and some rehabilitation. It is called the Department of Rehabilitation and Correction, and we sort of lost that concept. But that's another day. And the final area that I would argue is critical in this election, in terms of civil liberties, is how we deal with education. Because while education is often not identified as a civil liberties issue, there is a fundamental civil liberties issue involved. Number one, in this country, we don't have a common religion. We have a belief that we should provide a basic education for every child so that they can participate and live to their fullest. And that has got to be the public education system. As soon as you take money away from the public education system and give it to the private education system, you put the public education system at risk. I believe if someone wants to send their child to a private school, that's fine. There's no reason in the universe that they shouldn't. Let them do it. We shouldn't stop them. We shouldn't make it more difficult. We shouldn't have different standards for private education than we have for public education. But our obligation is to provide a public education for every child. And then we ought to understand that the other area in education where civil liberties is getting at risk is you got people who are starting to create conversation about the curriculum that doesn't have anything to do with scientific inquiry, with actual history, but has to do with creating a certain set of religious values that are imposed into the education. Now again, I think we have a quite diverse set of religious education. And if someone wants their child to have a religious education, they should. Myself, I taught Sunday school for years. I wanted my kids to have a religious education at Sunday school. So I had to teach, right? That's how it works. And I expected that I made that my responsibility. I made them go. Hopefully something good happens out of it. But I knew that was my responsibility. I didn't expect that to be responsibility of the government. I have friends who felt that their children needed a religious education, and they went to Catholic school. Some of them went all the way through, some of them went in younger grades, some of them went to Jewish schools, all kind of different ways in order to create an education that had your religious values. That is different than imposing those values in the public education system. So when you listen to the candidates, you got to listen, I think, for all 6 of those things.